The Parsons Green bomber lied about his age in order to remain in the UK. A judge ruled before jailing him for 34 years. Iraqi-born Ahmed Hassan claimed he was a 16-year-old orphan when he entered the UK illegally 3 years ago and applied for asylum. He claimed he had been kidnapped by Islamic State in Iraq and Levant. But Mr Justice Haddon-Cave said he was satisfied the would-be killer lied about his age in order to stay in the country and plot his terror attack. Following his assertion, the judge jailed Hassan for life with a minimum of 34 years. The case raises concerns over how many asylum seekers are taking advantage of this system by claiming to be children. In 2016, the government came under scrutiny when pictures emerged of asylum seekers claiming to be unaccompanied kids, even though they appeared much older than 17. Home Office officials later suggested they might look older because of the ordeals they had suffered. But critics say the system is flawed and open to be exploited by terrorists looking to get into the UK. Hassan tried to blow up a packed tube train in West London. He claimed he was 18 and pretended to engage with the anti-terrorism prevent scheme as he plotted mass murder in the capital. He made a bomb with 400 grams of Mother of Satan explosives and 2.2 kilograms of shrapnel while his unsuspecting foster parents were on holiday in Blackpool. The Old Bailey heard he wanted to avenge the death of his father in Iraq and was disappointed when the bomb only partly detonated in a huge fireball. A jury rejected his explanation that he only wanted to act out a fantasy like the Tom Cruise film Mission Impossible and convicted him of multiple attempted murder. He made no reaction as Mr Justice Haddon-Cave handed him a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. The judge said Hassan was a dangerous and devious individual who quietly went about plotting his attack with ruthless determination and almost military efficiency while pretending to be a model asylum seeker. He told Hassan, "Your intention that morning was to kill as many members of the British public as possible. I'm satisfied you were determined to create as much death and carnage that day as possible." The judge said he was satisfied Hassan had lied about his age to get special privileges. Hassan was motivated by Islamic State extremism, deep-seated hatred of Britain, revenge for the death of his father and anger at continued bombing in Iraq. For nearly 2 years, the highly intelligent college student had lived a double life, he said. Hassan had been shown every kindness since he arrived in Britain, yet harbored dark thoughts and significant hatred and animosity towards the country that took him in. After handing down the lengthy sentence today, Mr Justice Haddon-Cave told Hassan, who had proclaimed himself to be very religious, "You should understand that the Quran is a book of peace. Islam is a religion of peace." He added, "Islam forbids breaking the law of the land where one is living or is a guest." The judge said, "One can only imagine a sense of betrayal felt by all those at Barnardo's and Brooklands College whom you duped." He was satisfied Hassan had trained with ISIS in Iraq, as he told British immigration officials, and was older than he purported to be. The asylum seeker plotted his attack under the nose of the government's counter-extremism program Prevent, which appears to have failed to act for months despite repeated referrals from worried charity workers and teachers. Months before the bombing, there were warning signs that the student, who hero-worshipped ISIS, was bent on revenge on the country which had offered him shelter. Yet he managed to slip the net. Prosecutors said it was just a matter of luck his homemade device, packed with knives, screwdrivers and nails, did not fully explode. His intended target was Earl's Court Station, where he hoped to kill hundreds of people on the train and platform in the middle of morning rush hour. Council officials have said sorry over failings in their dealings with Parsons Green bomber Ahmed Hassan. The 18-year-old was said by police to have engaged with the radicalization scheme Prevent through its channel program while keeping his plot secret. A Surrey County Council spokesman said, "Staff from the agencies on the channel panel met Hassan on many occasions between February 2016 and September 2017. Hassan received extensive support from these agencies, including mental health and educational support, and the panel monitored and reviewed this. This was a difficult case in tough circumstances. We have a duty as a county council to provide support to unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who arrive in Surrey, and we're also expected to work with law enforcement agencies and others to help stop people being drawn into terrorism. Our work with other agencies in this case wasn't as good as it should have been, and we're sorry for our part in that. We knew before the terrible incident at Parsons Green that we needed to make changes and had already begun to do so. Since then we have made further improvements and continue to focus on ensuring our work in this area is as good as it can be. Our thoughts remain with everyone affected." But the train was delayed and the bomb went off at Parsons Green station instead, 2 minutes after Hassan dumped the device and fled. A giant fireball injured more than 30 passengers, and dozens more were wounded in the ensuing crush as they stampeded away from the explosion. After he was found guilty, it emerged that 20 months before the attack, Prevent were tipped off about Hassan by children's charity Bernardo's a day after his first interview with the Home Office, when he revealed he had been trained to kill by ISIS in Iraq. His teacher at college, where he was considered a model student, made a second referral in August 2016 after he was seen making a donation to ISIS and reveling in propaganda videos and call to arms songs. Prevent were called again when Hassan disappeared a month later to Wales for a week without telling anyone. But the Iraqi asylum seeker was never considered for intervention work with an Islamic expert despite the repeated warnings. The teenage bomber did receive educational and mental health support, and worryingly he also had contact with counter-terrorism officers. But no one realized he was plotting an attack that could have killed hundreds of people. Hassan had been given an education in the UK and housed with foster parents Ron and Penny Jones. Mrs. Jones said, "I don't think social services even realized because they never told us. If they had been aware they would have said something to us. The Home Office should have been honest. He still needed somewhere to live, he still needed to be looked after, but I would have liked to have known because we could have been looking out for signs of radicalization. It feels like a total betrayal. I can't believe he would do something like that. I'm just so grateful he didn't succeed." Her husband added, "If we'd known, we could have been more watchful. I still can't believe he did it. He seemed like such a good kid." Mrs. Jones added, "The police said if the bomb had gone off when it should, it would have been in a tunnel and it would have taken out 2 carriages. And we would have had to live with that. We would have had to live, knowing it had been done in our house without our knowledge, and that people had died as a result. It's bad enough that people got burned, and I feel terribly sorry for those people. I want them all to know that I knew nothing about it, and I'm horrified. They've obviously gone through an awful lot of trauma because of this, and so have we. The fact that no de-radicalization intervention was ordered in the case will raise serious concerns about the effectiveness of Prevent." The Home Secretary Amber Rudd will now face questions on the astonishing blunder when she appears in front of the Home Affairs Select Committee next week. Victims of the Parsons Green tube bomb believed they were going to die in the rush hour blast, a court heard, as they spoke of their nightmares since the attack last year. Commuters were caught in a fireball when Ahmed Hassan's bucket bomb partially exploded, leaving 23 people with burns and a further 28 with injuries from the panicked stampede to get away. Prosecutor Alison Morgan told the Old Bailey at Hassan's sentencing hearing on Friday that the likely result of the device fully exploding would have been serious harm, if not fatality, to those close to it. Commuter Stephen Nash said he had to give up his job as a social worker due to his fear of getting on the tube since the incident in September 2017. He was left shaking, unable to sleep and anxious after the attack, in which he suffered severe burns to his head and ears as well as blisters to his mouth and nose, and now avoids traveling into the capital. In a victim impact statement read by Ms. Morgan, Mr. Nash said, "Since the attack I have not used the tube. I believed I was going to die, so, due to fear, I don't use the tube. I don't go into London anymore. I don't like being amongst crowds." Another victim, Lucinda Glazebrook, suffered superficial burns to her face and hands, and has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. In her statement, also read by Ms. Morgan, she said, "I view myself as a changed person. I believed I was going to die." She told how she was plagued by disturbing images of the bomb exploding in the face of Hassan. She said, "When this happens I feel frightened and experience physical reactions including palpitations and breathlessness." Ann Stewart said she had been left on edge and tearful for no discernible reason. She said she has endured frightening dreams, adding, "Since this happened I wake most mornings shaking and anxious." Daniel Prieto, who suffered burns to his neck and had his eyelashes singed in the blast, said he cannot bring himself to use Parsons Green Station because it brings back bad memories, Ms. Morgan said. He added that his life had changed completely and said he had to receive treatment from a psychologist to overcome the effects of the explosion. Another victim, identified only as Miss S., also had to see a psychologist, and has scars that will take up to 2 years to heal, Ms. Morgan said, after suffering 16% burns to her body as the fire melted her tights. Ahmed Hassan, you have been found guilty by a jury of the Old Bailey of attempted murder on overwhelming evidence. This is a case of attempted multiple murder. I will now sentence you for this most serious offense. Please sit down. Shortly before 7 a.m. on Friday 15th of September 2017, you left your foster parents' home in Sunbury on foot carrying a heavy Lidl shopping bag and headed for Sunbury railway station. The Lidl bag must have looked innocuous enough to members of the public, including children, who passed you, but, in fact, its contents were extremely sinister and dangerous. It contained an improvised explosive device, IED, which you had spent the previous hours, days and weeks, meticulously researching, refining and manufacturing in your bedroom at 47 Cavendish Road where you lived with your foster parents. The IED contained 400 grams of the high-explosive triacetone triperoxide, TAP. The explosive TAP, or Mother of Satan as it is sometimes known, has increasingly become the explosive of choice for terrorists. You packed the device with 2.2 kilograms of metal shrapnel comprising nails, screws, bolts, sockets, knives and screwdrivers. You had a homemade initiator in your pocket which you had manufactured out of a kitchen timer. Your intention that morning was to kill as many members of the British public as possible by planting the IED on a busy commuter tube train and then make your escape to the continent via Dover according to a pre-arranged plan. You took the overground from Sunbury to Wimbledon and, on arrival, disappeared into the public toilets. There you set the timer for 15 minutes and placed it with the device inside the Lido bag. You then boarded a District Line tube train at Wimbledon which left at 8:08 a.m. heading towards Edgware. You positioned yourself by the rear right-hand door in car 6 of the tube and placed the Lido bag on the floor beside you. The CCTV shows that car 6 began to fill up page 2 of 11 with commuters at the intermediate stops of Wimbledon Park, Southfields and East Putney all heading to work in central London. When the tube arrived at Putney Bridge Station at 8:17 a.m. you slipped out as more people boarded the carriage and made your way down the stairs and out of the station. You were wearing a beanie hat, a grey jumper and headphones and were making a conscious effort to behave casually and blend into the crowd. You knew that approximately 2 minutes later your IED would go off killing, you hoped, dozens of people in the tube. At 8:19 and 54 seconds a.m. your IED exploded in car 6 of the District Line tube train shortly after it had arrived at the next stop, Parsons Green Station. There were approximately 93 people in the carriage when the device went off. The IED created a large fireball which rolled along the ceiling of the carriage. Numerous passengers sustained burns to their faces, heads, hair, arms and legs and were showered with glass. People ran out in fear and panic, helping other victims as they went. A major incident was declared. A total of 23 passengers received burns injuries, some significant, and a total of 28 people who were on the tube or at Parsons Green Station that day suffered crush injuries in the aftermath of the incident. Fortunately, no one was killed. Those at the rear end of car 6 that day were very fortunate. Things could easily have been so much worse. You made and planted a very significant explosive device. Given the amount of TAP, 400 grams, used in the weight and variety of shrapnel packed around it, 2.2 kilograms, had the device fully detonated as you designed and intended, it is inevitable that there would have been numerous fatalities and serious casualties, particularly amongst those in the closest proximity standing or sitting nearest to the IED. I am satisfied that it was your desire and intention to kill significant numbers of members of the public on that busy tube train that morning. It is sheer luck that the main charge did not fully detonate. This was due, most likely, to the initiator moving out of place and not igniting the main charge. As a result, it triggered only a partial explosion, or what the prosecution explosives expert, Dr. Sarah Wilson, a senior forensic case officer at the Forensic Explosives Laboratory at the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, called a violent deflagration as opposed to a detonation of the main charge. The immediate aftermath was marked by remarkable bravery by passengers caught up in this incident. In particular, a recently retired Met police officer and an ex-Army officer, both of whom had the presence of mind to approach the device as it continued to burn in order to assess its remaining danger and warn others and the authorities. The Met explosives team were quickly on the scene to neutralize it. I am satisfied that you were determined to create as much death and carnage that day as possible. You had filled the Tupperware box you had selected with 300 grams of TAP, and when you found you had excess, you put the remaining 100 grams into a blue glass jar which you then placed on top of the Tupperware, in order to maximize the main charge. You stole knives from Mr. and Mrs. Jones's kitchen and went out shopping on 14th September to Asda and Aldi, carefully selecting metal tools to buy which would provide the most effective, dangerous page 3 of 11 and heaviest shrapnel. You targeted the District Line tube from Wimbledon at rush hour because you were familiar with it and knew it would be crowded with passengers. You cynically placed a pair of trousers over the top of the open bag to make it look innocuous and avoid the sort of suspicion that, for example, a closed rucksack might have engendered if abandoned on a tube. You made a viable timer and initiator. You wanted to save your own skin and were not prepared for shahada, martyrdom. On exiting Putney Bridge Station, you set about executing a carefully thought-out escape plan which involved surreptitiously destroying your SD card and disposing of your phone. 2. Taking a complex series of bus, tube and train journeys via Fulham, Earls Court, Richmond, Clapham Junction, Brighton, Ashford to Dover. And 3. Wearing 4 tops and 3 bottoms so you could switch your clothes at least 4 times in 24 hours. You also had £2,300 in cash with you and had deliberately wiped your Mac computer so your web history could not investigate it. You could not resist a glance out of the bus as it passed Parsons Green tube station to see the results of your handiwork. And the first thing you did after buying a new phone at Dover was to check the headline news. As Ms. Alison Morgan for the prosecution said, "It must have come as a great disappointment to you to see that the ID which you had so carefully created had failed to operate correctly and the carnage which you had hoped to create had not occurred." You were arrested at 7:52 a.m. on the morning of Saturday 16th of September 2018 waiting for the Dover ferry as a result of the good old-fashioned police work and alertness of officers at Dover who recognizing you from the circulated image and approached you and questioned you. It is telling that as soon as they arrested you, you started shaking, praying and complaining that your rucksack should not be placed on the ground because it had the Quran in it. You were clearly very religious. You were not averse to using others to cover your tracks, for example, having the hydrogen peroxide delivered to the address of a friend, Mr. Mahmood, and then telling the police at Dover you were meeting another friend, Mr. Farouk, both of whom were entirely innocent. Following your arrival in the United Kingdom in 2015, you were content to lead a double life for almost 2 years. You presented as a very polite, well-behaved and exceptionally bright model student, grateful for the opportunities that were being given to you. You cynically exploited to the full the generosity and naivety of the system and those looking after and helping you. Meanwhile, you harbor dark thoughts. Those dark thoughts lay dormant for periods, particularly as you began to achieve academic success at Brooklands College, culminating in you being awarded a prize in July 2017 as Student of the Year. In a remarkable act of cynicism, you used your prize money from the college, a £20 Amazon voucher, to purchase the first ingredient for the ID. One can only imagine the sense of betrayal felt by all those at Barnardo's and Brooklands College whom you duped. I sentence you on the basis that you did not start actively planning this attack until about a month before 15th of September 2017. i.e. in mid-August 2017 when the evidence shows you began researching the ingredients for TATP on the web. In my judgment, taking all the above considerations in aggravating and mitigating factors which I have outlined into account, the appropriate minimum term is 34 years with no discount for time spent in custody. 47. So, Ahmed Hassan, for the offense of attempted murder of which you have been convicted, I sentence you to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years. Finally, Ahmed Hassan, let me say this to you. You will have plenty of time to study the Quran in prison in the years to come. You should understand that the Quran is a book of peace, Islam is a religion of peace. The Quran and Islam forbid anything extreme, including extremism in religion. Islam forbids breaking the law of the land where one is living or is a guest. Islam forbids terrorism, haraba. The Quran and the Sunnah provide that the crime of perpetrating terror to cause corruption in the land is one of the most severe crimes in Islam. 1 So it is in the law of the United Kingdom. You have, therefore, received the most severest sentences under the law of this land. You have violated the Quran and Islam by your actions, as well as the law of all civilized people. It is to be hoped that you will come to realize this one day. Please go with the officers.
Where the freaks at?